A bunch of wonderful people. This is wonderful. Roxy's here. Susan. Oh, wonderful people. So we'll begin a little bit after 7 on this beautiful evening. Thank you for joining us. This is being recorded, so if you miss something, we can always go back. Please put your questions into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll ask them of Joey when he's finished his talk, his slideshow, PowerPoint. And I'm showing my age when I say slideshow, Joey. There you go. And hope everybody got to enjoy the day a little bit today. It's such a lovely day. Last night, South Sound had a wonderful meeting, had a wonderful presentation on events that affect the environment and how to connect art with eruptions in nature and wonderful things. Okay, we'll begin in just a moment. So I'm just going to say good evening to everyone. And I'm going to introduce our speaker right now. So Dr. Joey Hulbert is a postdoctoral research fellow at WSU with support from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. He is based in the Ornamental Plant Pathology program at the WSU Research and Extension Center in Puyallup. He has a background in forest health that started with a BS degree in natural resources at WSU. Then he spent 4 years at Oregon State University working and learning about sudden oak death before traveling to South Africa to complete a PhD in, there's something missing, PhD. In South Africa, he explored the possibilities of community science through a program called Cape Citizen Science, where he engaged communities in research about plant disease in the Cape Floristic Region. A brief video that highlights some of the youth engagement activities in this biodiversity hotspot is available here. There is a link right on the registration page for that. Together, his experiences have prepared him to lead the Forest Health Watch program. But here's the catch. He needs more partners to contribute to the co-design and production of the program. Joey is eager to engage with the Washington Native Plant Society and looks forward to the discussions and feedback. The Forest Health Watch is an initiative to engage communities in research and learning about forest health issues in the Pacific Northwest. The pilot project of the program is focused on mapping healthy and unhealthy red cedar trees to identify areas where they may be vulnerable and the environmental parameters that are driving the dieback. The program specifically seeks the help of the Washington Native Plant Society members and invites our membership to participate and provide feedback. More information about participating in the research is available at https://foresthealth.org/map. And I'm now going to turn this over to Joey. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gail. It's really an honor to be introduced by you. And Gail didn't mention this, but we both live in Tacoma. So today I'm coming to you from Tacoma as sort of a neighbor to the Vice President of the Native Plant Society. But I'm really grateful to be here. As Gail mentioned, are really eager to engage with the Native Plant Society and the members like yourselves. So thank you for coming and sharing some of your time this evening. I'm going to briefly provide a little bit of an introduction to myself and our program. Then I'm going to talk about some of the tree health issues that we're concerned with and further introduce the Forest Health Watch program before talking about how some community scientists are already contributing and really as a way to illustrate and demonstrate the methods where anyone can participate. And then after that, we'll highlight how those participants and how that information that's being shared and collected will help us conserve Western Red Cedar and other species in the Northwest. So before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that today I'm coming to you from Tacoma, and I have the privilege to really explore and learn and study and conduct research on this traditional homeland of the Puyallup tribe of Indians. So I just want to highlight that we are super privileged to work at this research and extension center in Puyallup on these sacred and beautiful lands of the Puyallup tribe. So I'm going to quickly go through this introduction, and some of it's a little redundant because Gail gave me such a nice introduction, but I do want to highlight that my parents are from Washington, and I actually grew up in Kansas. And then when we moved back to Washington in 2006, I had to study forestry because I was so deprived of trees in Kansas. And so in 2010, I completed a bachelor's at Washington State University. Then after that, I went to Oregon and I started working and learning in Oregon. But I spent every field season or every summer of my undergraduate conducting researches with the various programs in the Northwest. And this really helped me fall in love with this process of research and recognize research as a way to make positive impacts on this planet. So this really is the kind of the foundation that I'm coming to you from. And what we're trying to do with the Forest Health Watch program is invite other people to participate and contribute to conserving our native plants and things like that by contributing to our research. So after I completed my bachelor's, I moved to Oregon State, and I first started working as a technician, and then it eventually turned into a master's in wood science and botany and plant pathology. And there I studied a tree disease called sudden oak death. And this really gave me this foundation in forest health and this interest in plant diseases. And I took that interest after exploring all these unhealthy trees and sick and dying oak trees and tan oak trees in Southwest Oregon. And I took this experience to South Africa, where I started a PhD, and I worked on the same group of microorganisms that are killing trees in Oregon, but I was studying plant disease in the Cape Floristic region, the biodiversity hotspot known as kind of the Cape Floral Kingdom. And it's just an incredible place. This really is where I became passionate about plant conservation and native species, because the immense amount of diversity and just incredible species that are present in part of the biome that I specifically worked on is the fynbos. So here in this photo is an example of a pretty dominant family of plants called Proteaceae. It's the Proteaceae family, and we were interested in the microbes that were killing the Proteaceae in the natural environments. And as Gail mentioned, we started a community science project there called Cape Citizen Science, where we engage communities in research about plant disease. But I just wanted to highlight my background a little bit. I completed that PhD in February 2020, and I returned to the US just in time before the lockdown. And I was really fortunate to begin working and learning with individuals at the Washington State University Research and Extension Center in Puyallup. So now I'm coming to you again from Tacoma, and I work and learn in Puyallup at this Research and Extension Center. There, I am completely supported at the moment by a fellowship provided by the USDA. So I want to acknowledge that we totally benefit from federal support, and that this program in this presentation is made possible today because of their support. So I joined a group called the Ornamental Plant Pathology group at the Puyallup Research and Extension Center. And I certainly encourage you to look at our webpage, because we have a number of resources on plant health issues. Some are ornamental, but we do a lot of work on native plants as well. So within that program, I mentioned I'm a fellow, a postdoctoral fellow. I'm mentored by a gentleman named Gary Chastagner, who is really an expert in conifer diseases and specifically ABs and other trees that have been used in Christmas tree operations. So he provides exceptional service to Christmas tree industry, but also through that has become a real expert in conifer health and tree health. Marianne Elliott is another research associate in that program who's a phenomenal mentor to myself, and she leads a lot of community engagement projects. And I'm going to mention the Arbutus Army in a second, but she has a kind of a unique background studying madrone and Pacific madrone trees, and has really helped mentor and shape this Forest Health Watch program. I also just like to highlight Todd Murray, because he's the new center director, but he has exceptional background in integrated pest management and forest insects. So together, all of us really represent this kind of team forest health at Washington State University. But I wanted to just introduce us all so that you know we're there as a resource, and our webpage may even have some information on native plants that you'd find interesting. So in that program, we do a lot of education and research around plant nurseries. And more recently, we're interested in native plant producing nurseries. So we want to ensure that those nurseries are producing clean stock, and that our restoration activities are not accidentally introducing microscopic organisms that cause disease, like sudden oak death, right? So we do a lot of education and engagement with growers like nurseries. I mentioned the Christmas tree research program, where we've supported this industry, which the Northwest produces 1/3 of the Christmas trees in the country every year. So it's a pretty substantial industry, and I'm really grateful to be a part. It's a pretty cool industry, as most of the trees as well are native plants. But then I mentioned sudden oak death a couple times. I have background in it, but we also do a little research in it, and we're concerned about the accidental introduction of this microorganism that causes this disease into environments through pathways such as the trade in ornamental plants like this, or native plants even. So be on the lookout. But we also work on Pacific madrone, as I mentioned, and this is a photo of a common garden where we're experimenting with the genetic diversity of the madrone. So we've collected madrone trees from 113 different families or populations throughout the native range of madrone, and we're interested in whether there's differences in the susceptibility to things like leaf blight. If you've seen a madrone lately, you've probably noticed how hammered they are by fungal and bacterial communities. The leaves are kind of shriveled and brown. We're slowly getting a new flush. But anyway, there's a lot more information about this on our website, puyallup.wsu.edu, excuse me. But within this Arbutus research, Marianne and a gentleman from Seattle Parks and Recreation established this Arbutus Army, which is a community group of all things madrone, and I encourage you to join that if you're not a part and you do love madrone. We have a pretty robust website with a lot of resources to madrone, and every year we host webinars and things where we invite scientists that are working on madrone to come and share their research. So again, that's arbutusarmy.org. So I'm going to shift gears now. That was just a quick introduction to myself and our program. I definitely welcome you all to follow up with us or get in touch with us if we can be of a service to you, or answer any questions. I'm going to switch, and I'm just going to highlight quickly a few local plant health issues. I say tree here, but you'll see in a minute there's also some plants. So the first issue that I'm going to talk about a little more is Western Red Cedar dieback. And I'm going to come back to this, but It is one of the main concerns, and it is the reason we selected it as the primary or the pilot project of the Forest Health Watch is because a number of our partners have indicated it's their primary concern right now. Another concern is big leaf maple dieback, where occasionally we'll see trees with branch dieback, or we'll see trees with extra small leaves compared to the tree next to it. And we're still kind of scratching our heads about why this is occurring. And I just want to highlight that it's still an issue and that we're interested now in tracking where we're seeing this. So I'll introduce that in a minute. Another concern that we have, and I encourage you to keep an eye out in the areas that you volunteer in, maybe in the parks that you visit, but we're concerned with this dieback of sword fern. And it's kind of characterized by sword ferns that don't regenerate. And so sometimes you just find these mounds, and sometimes it leaves the understory quite barren. And so that's another thing, another local forest health issue that we're concerned with. Again, there's more information about that one specifically on our website that I introduced a minute ago. We're also interested in madrone leaf blight. As part of the Arbutus Army, there's a project on an app called Tree Snap, where they ask people to mark where they see madrones and rate how healthy they are and things like that. And I'm happy to answer questions on that, but I'm not going to present on that at this time. We're also concerned with an elevated or an increase in alder dieback. We're hearing reports of alder dying, and we're still not really sure what's going on there. So we'd like to do more research there. Western hemlock, Washington state tree, is also exhibiting increased dieback. We've heard, I think most recently, the concerns I was hearing were out of Issaquah, in the area around Issaquah, but there's something going on with Western hemlock, and we're still not sure. It's kind of new enough that we haven't really been able to investigate it very thoroughly. But I just wanted to highlight these to so that you're aware, and when you maybe see one of these, you know that we're interested in tracking where it's occurring. The last one is a new one that's just recently kind of coming out. I don't know. I guess it's been in Seattle for a little while, but we're unsure whether it's something new or whether it's something that's been there for a long time, but it's just emerging as a problem because the climate is warming. It's really unclear, but it's another issue that we're concerned with. And there was recently in this Washington State DNR, Department of Natural Resources, in their Small Forest Landowners newsletter, there's a little article there that I direct you to if you're interested and concerned about that. So I mentioned Western Red Cedar dieback. This is our priority project at the moment. It's our pilot project for the Forest Health Watch program. And I'm going to talk about why we selected Western Red Cedar. We are, perhaps some of the reason that we chose Western Red Cedar, in addition to our partners identifying it as a primary concern, and that was largely because there's we're actually seeing trees die, mature trees die in some cases. So there's concern around that we're actually seeing trees die, but we're also concerned because of the importance that Western Red Cedar has in our culture and our economy and our environments. So I'm going to illustrate that a little bit. Western Red Cedar is super important because of its role in our cultural legacy in the Northwest. There are so many uses of Western Red Cedar. It's not even well documented in a single location, but if you look on the Washington State Historical Society and you just browse through the archives, if you type in Western Red Cedar, you'll find a lot of really cool materials and uses and photographs documenting Western Red Cedar used in housing or in transportation or in storage and other shelters. This diagram by Heidi Bohan in her book, Peoples of Cascadia, is a really great illustration of all the different uses. And It's often considered the tree of life because from birth to grave, there's uses that you benefit from Western Red Cedar for. So we're really just highlighting that Western Red Cedar is an enormous component of the indigenous cultures in the Northwest, and it's super important to protect because of that reason. But Western Red Cedar is also an important part of our industrial legacy in the Northwest, in the kind of the industrial heritage. So if you look at neighborhoods in Seattle like Ballard, which used to be called or referred to as Shingle Town, they were really built on industries that were largely created from Western Red Cedar products, such as wood, such as shingles and planks. And again, if you look at the Washington State Historical Society, there's some really incredible photographs of these ancient and giant Western Red Cedar trees. And it's just amazing to think about kind of how these trees have survived for so many generations and so many ancestors, and just really illustrates that Western Red Cedar is really an icon and a keystone in our culture. Ecologically, it's really important as well. It contributes to soil stability, nutrient cycling. It's really important for habitat. Occasionally on the west side, you'll find it in nearly pure stands, although it's usually mixed with other species like Douglas fir or Western hemlock. If we look just alone in the urban city or in the urban context, if we just look at Seattle, we know there are about 2,000 Western Red Cedar trees alone in the city of Seattle, and we can just kind of gives us a glimpse of the importance of the species in the urban environment, where it's contributing to things like reducing heat island effects and improving mental well-being and in addition to ecological processes like soil quality and air quality. So Western Red Cedar is super important in the urban environment in Washington State as well. I just added this. There's a page on our webpage about Western Red Cedar specifically in Seattle if you're interested, and if you're coming to us today from Seattle, I encourage you to check it out. Western Red Cedar is also pretty important because it has a substantial footprint in the region in the Northwest. It has a really large distribution, and so it's contributing all of these important processes in a large area in the Northwest. And recognizing that is another reason why we need to figure out how to keep this Western Red Cedar on these landscapes. So to summarize, Western Red Cedar is an important part of our cultural legacy. It's an important part of our industrial heritage. It contributes a lot of different services ecologically, both in natural and urban environments, and it has a really robust distribution and footprint. However, we're concerned. We're concerned because we're hearing increased reports of dieback. We're seeing dieback. Sometimes it's a mature tree. Sometimes we just start to see the canopy start to thin, or it becomes extra see-through. Sometimes the top will die back and slowly kind of grow or decline over many years. Sometimes it's a tree in the middle of a forest, and other times it's out in a field or along a road. To illustrate this further, I'm going to just highlight some photos from community scientists that have contributed. So these are all photos of Western Red Cedar dying tops or thinning canopies in the Portland area. These are more around King County. I think this is out in the Olympics. More in King County. These are around Olympia. This is like Northwest Trek area. It seems really bad if you go out to kind of east side of Tacoma. More in Olympia. Joel Rush is from Vancouver Island in British Columbia. These three photos are all from Vancouver. So it just illustrates that we're seeing this dieback from, well, these are all on the west side, but we're seeing them in Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. So it seems like it's really having an effect across the range, at least on the west side. This is also noted in a lot of news articles. So Parksville, BC, this one's Washington, Vancouver. So there, I guess these four are all British Columbia. This one's also, so I guess there's a lot of concern around British Columbia and some in Washington that has been noted in the news recently. This is also illustrated by the aerial survey data, where the Forest Service, in partnership with the state agency, Department of Natural Resource, they fly airplanes over our forests every year. And in 2017, they started mapping where they're seeing Western Red Cedar dieback. And every year they notice more and more. Something that's neat, unfortunately, because of a pandemic, they haven't been able to fly in 2020, and they're concerned that their field season will be limited this year as well. So they just asked us if community scientists have reported any really bad areas, and whether there's like clumps of areas where there's lots of reports, for them to prioritize those areas to fly surveys. So it's pretty cool. The community scientists have already kind of had an impact, and that information being shared by community scientists is informing decisions by the federal, the Forest Service in this case. But within this concern, you know, the real reason that we need research and we need the help of community scientists is because it's urgent. There's already a lot of people that are making decisions not to plant Western Red Cedar because they're seeing dieback. And this is a tragedy when we consider how important Western Red Cedar is to our culture and our environment, because rather than planting other species, we should be finding solutions to keep Western Red Cedar if it's possible. And so this is really an example of how the science is behind the need. We really need urgent information. So this is where the community science approach is our best chance of finding the solution quickly. So that's where we created this Forest Health Watch program. I encourage you to engage with us in any capacity. We have a lot of resources and information, particularly around climate and forest health and things like that on our webpage, foresthealth.org. And I invite you to get involved in shaping this program. Right now, we're really focused on red cedar, but maybe there's another plant species that we should focus on next. And I invite you to get involved and help shape where we go. So far, we've had incredible support from a lot of different partners. And all of these partners have really participated in like collaborator update meetings, and they've helped shape and define where we're going. And we're really fortunate to have such incredible support, but we're certainly always looking for more. Within the Forest Health Watch program, there's a lot of different resources, and I'm not going to go into these all specifically, but I'll highlight that we have a listserv that you can join if you want to bounce ideas off other community scientists. We have office hours, so you're welcome to come during the office hours and ask questions or learn how to use iNaturalist, those kind of things. And another thing we do is we have monthly research updates. So we just had one on yesterday. Was that yesterday? And we, yeah, it was yesterday. And every month we have a research update where we look at the community science data and we start looking for patterns, and we hear back from individuals like yourselves about the direction that we're going and the challenges that maybe you faced with iNaturalist. So that we can improve the program and keep you all up to date on what we're seeing and what's coming out and what's being shared. But as I mentioned, we are always looking for more partners and collaborators. Clearly, individuals like yourselves that are passionate about native plants I would really benefit and would love to hear your perspective. Your perspective is super important to us in ensuring that this program is useful and doing the right, advancing the right knowledge and conducting research in ways that are meaningful. But we're also looking for communities to engage. And so if you're a friend of a park, or if you have another community group that would benefit from a presentation, or maybe someday a field visit, let us know. I would love to do that. I would love to meet with more communities, and we could structure it more as like training on how to recognize an unhealthy plant or something, so that we can use this program to give back more. Okay, I'm going to shift now and start talking about how community scientists are contributing and the kind of the method to get involved if you're interested. So with support from multiple people in federal and state agencies, we worked with them to build a project on an app that's called iNaturalist. And so iNaturalist is a really neat tool. You can use it from your computer, or you can download the mobile app. But essentially, the app was made to help people identify the organisms they're seeing. So generally, you could take a picture of any organism and you can share it on iNaturalist. And the community will help you identify what you saw based on those photos. And then there's opportunity to discuss, or there's opportunity to kind of create collections with those. And so one thing that we did is we created a specific project on iNaturalist. And the way that it works is you would join the project. First, you create a user, you create a login on iNaturalist, and then you join the project. And then when you're sharing an observation of Western Red Cedar, you tag the project. And when you tag this project, it asks you some other questions. And these questions are what really helps us figure out what's going on and helps advance the knowledge and accelerate the research. And so it asks you questions about what you saw. Did you see a tree that was thinning, like this tree in Point Defiance, where it's really easy to see through compared to these other trees? Did you see trees where the whole tops are dying? And every year it's probably progressing and getting worse? Or did you just see entire trees that were already dead or had just recently died? It also asks you, questions about the site. Was the tree right next to the road? Was the tree in the middle of a field? Or was it in the middle of a forest? And really importantly, it asks you, are there other possible factors that might explain why that tree died? So with this, we're interested in knowing, are there things out there that are making this worse? Is there something out there that we're missing, or is it really just climate and drought? So we asked, did you see any fungal activity like armillaria? Did you see evidence of an insect or wood borer or a bark beetle? Here's some examples of a fungus, like this is armillaria, and these are Schweinitzii. This is armillaria. If you peel back the bark on a red cedar and you see this armillaria growing all over it, it's a pretty good indicator that there's something else going on. This is an example of insect frass that you might know. This is essentially excrement from a wood-boring insect or a bark beetle. Clearly there's some holes. Bark beetles are really cool in that you can actually distinguish and identify what they are based on the shape of their galleries. So in some cases, if you peel back the bark and you see these, this is another important note to make, that there was a bark beetle involved, or we saw evidence of bark beetles, although most of the time we suspect that the bark beetles come in secondary, like after the tree is already in decline and weakened. We're also kind of concerned with this fungus. We haven't seen it very, very extensively, but around Seattle, many citizen scientists or community scientists have shared observations with fungus on it. And this is, we think we know what it is, and it's a Hulbert fungus that isn't really an aggressive pathogen, but it's still worth noting and watching out for. So this is kind of where we are. as of, I think this is a week old, but what's really neat is that we're starting to see observations throughout kind of this whole West Coast, where we have observations from Canada to Portland. But we clearly need more observations like on the east side of the Cascades or out in the Olympics or over in eastern Idaho, if any of you are kind of on the east side of Washington, definitely in the northeast part of Washington. You know, we just don't know what's going on with Western Red Cedar in those areas. Are they healthy? Are they the same symptoms, or are they different symptoms? So on our website, we also have some preliminary analyses. This is just foresthealth.org/analyses, and it's just a different dashboard where you can look through and see the information presented in a different way. So for example, if we click on this, it looks like I'm logged in, but you can click on an individual and it will show you where all their observations are. And the next slide I was going to show you is a little bit of a breakdown on the different health categories. So more than 55% of the trees that have been shared so far are healthy, which is excellent. That means that you know, we have some negative controls. We know where trees are healthy. Finding a stand of red cedar that's healthy in this block over here might be just as important as a stand where there's trees that have dead tops or thinning canopies, right? So that's all I'm going to show you in terms of that dashboard, but I do welcome you to go and visit this page and kind of explore those data a little bit and see what's going on with the iNaturalist data. These update every single day thanks to a volunteer named Tyler Sheldon who was able to make that work. So every day you can go back there and see if there's different patterns that are emerging. I also want to highlight that, you know, Western Red Cedar is where our main interest is, and it's where we've really focused, but we did just recently create some other projects to start tracking where we're seeing these other issues. So just recently we made these other projects because we realized, like, we get all these reports. I'll present about Western Red Cedar and someone will say, well, what about Douglas fir? I'm seeing top dieback and Doug fir. Or what about big leaf maple? You know, why aren't we tracking where that's occurring? So now with iNaturalist, we created this space so that we can start tracking where that's happening. I do also want to mention that we're interested in the soil fungal communities, and we want to know, are there different communities in healthy trees that might be benefiting the tree, or are there pathogens that might be involved? And so we want to see if there's a difference in the fungal communities between healthy and unhealthy trees. And so in the fall, we're going to invite community scientists to collect and send soil samples to us in Puyallup. And I would be really grateful if any of you are interested in helping with that. So to this final section that I'm going to go through briefly is just to illustrate how this data will be useful and how these contributions will contribute to finding a solution for conserving Western Red Cedar for future generations. So first, it's giving us a strong idea of where Western Red Cedar is dying and where it's not, right? I just introduced that we know it's occurring throughout its whole range, and that's largely because of community science data. We don't have a good understanding of what's going on in this whole other part of the Western Red Cedar range, but our goal is to reach 2,000 observations by the end of the year. We're about 30% of the way, but I would, if you have contacts in communities out here and you want to share the project with them, or if you can invite me to give a presentation, or if you just find yourself over there and you remember the project, please contribute and share what you're seeing. It's also helping us identify where trees may be vulnerable. So with all those questions that we're asking, we're interested in knowing, you know, are trees in these kind of upland areas more susceptible than trees in, say, a wetland? Or are trees in the wetland the most vulnerable trees? And so similarly, you know, we can look at where trees are on the sites. We can look at what aspect the trees are growing on, or eventually we want to overlay the data with soil conditions and soil classes, and start looking at the soil variation as a predictor of where trees may be unhealthy. In that same regard, we want to do overlay analyses with environmental parameters. So we want to identify, is it temperature or is it precipitation that explains where we're seeing dieback and where we're not. And then with that information, we can use tools more effectively. So for example, there's this incredible tool called the seed lot selection tool, where restoration groups or foresters or other communities can identify where they want to plant a Western Red Cedar, and they can pick which climate scenario they're interested in that tree being adapted for. So right here, I've just selected the current conditions. But then you have to identify which climatic variable you want to make this decision based on. And this is where the tool kind of breaks down, because we don't know which climatic variable is the most important yet. But we'll be able to use this more effectively after we have enough observations on iNaturalist that we can identify the strongest environmental predictors for where dieback's occurring. And then finally, once we know which environmental parameters are important and where trees are vulnerable, we can start to screen other populations of red cedar against those parameters and test for and try and identify and select populations that are more tolerant or more resistant. And this is the next step. It's down the road. We first have to get through and kind of understand where we're seeing dieback and where we're not. And then this is one approach to trying to find, first trying to discover if there's enough genetic variation that we can use it as a tool to then conserve Western Red Cedar on our landscapes. So really it takes us all to get to this step. We really need the help of community scientists to address this issue. It's really a pressing and urgent issue, and we don't have enough information. And so we really rely on individuals like you to help advance this understanding and create this shared understanding, really. Generally the consensus is that the longer and hotter summers or the longer and hotter droughts are what's driving this dieback. But we can't even say that with full confidence. And being able to say that with confidence would be really, really helpful. And we need more information to do that, because then whenever you're having a discussion about climate change, you can point to the dieback of Western Red Cedar as example of the effects of climate change in our neighborhoods and our communities. But right now we can't say that with confidence because we don't have enough information. Anyway, that's just a tangent. So I really welcome you. Let me know what you're thinking. Your perspectives are really important, and we would love to have your involvement and engage with you in any capacity. So feel free to contact me directly. You can contact us through the website, or feel free to follow up now with any questions. Thank you all.
Joey, thank you. That was really interesting. And there are a lot of things going through my mind. I'm not sure I can actually put them in the questions, but we do have a question, one question so far.
Okay.
And it is in reference to soil. So this is from Linnea. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I'm sorry if I am not. Does the soil type the trees are growing on have anything to do with their dieback? We have noticed that it seems to happen more to trees on thin soils, other on clay or bedrock.
So that's, I agree that yes, definitely soils are having a role, they're playing an important component of where trees are vulnerable or not, but it's complex. It's really complex. It's interesting to hear that you're seeing it more on clay soils because those are typically um, less well drained than say a sandy soil. And it seemed like at first we were seeing a lot of dieback in really well drained soils where the water was just not being retained. But we're learning that it's actually way more complex than that because the trees acclimate to the site conditions they're in. So for example, if Western Red Cedar is right next to a stream, it has really shallow root systems because it doesn't have to reach very deep for that water. However, if Western Red Cedar is on top of the lands, a slope, it may put its roots really deep in order to reach that water. And what seems like we're seeing, and this is anecdotal, but it seems like those trees with shallow roots are more vulnerable to changes in the water table than those trees with deep roots. And so that may explain why, if they're shallow soils, as you say, or if they're right up against the bedrock and they have shallow soil, shallow roots, that may be explaining what's going on more than say the soil type. But our answers are really preliminary. Once there's more observations on there, we'll be able to do some overlay analyses and look at the different soil classes that are present on the sites where there's bad dieback and less dieback and compare them.
I'm also a master gardener, and at the clinic, sometimes we get, well, in drier years when there's less water, when there's more drought, we have a lot of tree dieback in general. So you seem to be implying that that the climate the change in the climate, whether it's warmer or whatever, there's a shift in climate, is causing some of these conditions.
Yeah, I think, I think across the board, we're seeing trees that are more stressed, more water stressed. And that's, then there's a lot of complications that arise. Maybe they've kind of co-evolved with the fungus and they've been able to tolerate each other and live in this nice balance. And then you start stressing them out through a change in the environment and that balance is thrown off. And that path, then that fungus might become more of a driver of what's going on. But I agree that kind of across the board, and especially in drier years, we are seeing spikes in tree health concerns. And if anything, it's just illustrating that we need to understand what's going on more. Right now, there's all these million tree campaigns and climate adaptation processes, and we're moving species around, or we're planting a ton of trees from the same cultivar, and we might just be setting ourselves up poorly in the future. But if we can think more about the genetic diversity and ensure that we're pulling things from the right tree, right place kind of stuff, then hopefully we can add more resiliency to these changes in climate.
Deb Naslin writes, interesting, the cedars on our property by the stream have died or are dying. The cedars upslope seem healthy.
Yeah, that seems to be, I at the same time, I don't want to say that's everywhere. I mean, that does seem like what's kind of emerging in my understanding. It's anecdotal. We haven't tested that. But at the same time, I know near Anacortes and some of the other areas that kind of on the east side of the Puget Sound, and the San Juans, the trees that are upslope and these rocky soils are the ones that are dying, and the trees that are down in the stream beds and stuff are healthy. So it doesn't seem to be the case everywhere, Deb, but it's just, the more we're looking at this, the more complex we're realizing it is. And we can't oversimplify it because it's just, it's not that simple, I guess.
Have you found fungi to be
So far in the question where it asks folks, what other factors did you see? Like when you look at the small scale, so you look at trees that have dead tops, there's only like 80 of the 600 trees. And then of those, there's only about 5 or 6 that have a fungus too. So it doesn't seem like the fungus is playing a big role, but at the same time, this is community science data, and it's hard to say whether. I think that most of our observations, we just are not looking that closely and things. So I wouldn't be comfortable saying, based on the community science data yet, I wouldn't say anything. I'd say we need more investigation, and that's kind of where we want to collect soils, and then we can do some lab work to see, okay, if there's armillaria in that soil with that tree, is it more likely to have top dieback? And we can test kind of those to see if that's playing a big important role. As we mentioned earlier, I feel like trees are becoming more water stressed, and so fungi and other things are going to become more important. Yeah, good question.
The Metroparks has a bunch of work parties on different days of the week all around the Tacoma area. And I have one at China Lake. It's the first Saturday of every month. And I'd like to invite you to come out one Saturday and maybe train our volunteers there on how to be citizen scientists using iNaturalist.
That would be great. And, especially because we're both in Tacoma, that's certainly doable. But I welcome other members on this call if there's another community that would also benefit in that kind of way.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I volunteered, so I hope that others would follow suit. So Gail Trotter says, thank you. That was really interesting. I live in the Spokane. Oh, excuse me, wrong question. I mixed up the two people. What are the typical ways, Gail asks, that land managers interface with your organization? You mentioned the interface with tree farms.
Well, so the interface with tree farms is through the Puyallup Ornamental Plant Pathology program, but through the Forest Health Watch program, which is kind of the side project that I'm leading in that ornamental, if that makes sense. Within the Forest Health Watch program, there are a lot of land managers that are using iNaturalist and contributing. For example, in our research update yesterday, there was a land manager that I've engaged with on a couple times, and I'm happy if there's individuals that want to have one-on-one meetings and we can meet and talk about things. But I'm really grateful for this particular landowner in kind of in Portland area, because they've put us in touch with a bunch of other landowners and land managers, and so we are growing a network. Most of our participants and contributions, as you can see from the maps, are from the urban areas. So it does seem like a lot of our participants are in cities, and that just might be a result of the communities that I'm engaging with and the networks that we're relying on. But the Washington State University Extension forester folks have been really incredible at including us, and they're kind of my direct connection to most small forest landowners. But I don't know if that answers your question, Gail. I welcome you to contact us, and you can do so through the Puyallup Ornamental Plant Pathology program, or you can contact us through the Forest Health Watch program, and you'll both routes you'll get to me, and I can help direct you to either another forest extension person, or someone in the county, or maybe the statewide forest stewardship guy. It depends on what you're interested in and need, but there are landowners contributing to the iNaturalist thing, and I think that's super important and helpful. Yeah, Logan, thank you. Thanks for volunteering to keep a lookout in Spokane. I know like up by the Kalispell and north, depend, how do you say it? Pendarville? No. But north of Spokane and kind of the northeast corner of Washington, there are a lot of red cedar, but we don't quite know what's going on. Ponderay, yes, thank you. Yeah, I know. I've heard reports in Ponderay. Our collaborator in Department of Natural Resources has indicated that some of the cedars on the east side just turn yellow, or they're more chlorotic and they're a little more yellow than they are normally. And so there's kind of this other symptom that she sees more often than, say, a top dieback like we see on the west side.
Okay, we have a question from someone who's anonymous. Are all ages of cedars dying, or younger, older?
That is such a good question. We one of the questions when you contribute to the project, it asks you what size is the tree. Can you wrap both hands around it? Can you wrap your arms around it for a medium? Is it too big for your arms as a large? And then, like, does it take many people for an extra large? And there are trees with top dieback and thinning crowns on all size classes. So it is kind of complex. It does seem like trees that were established in maybe the last 10 years might be, yeah, again, I think it comes back to the rooting depth and things like that, and the water table changes, but generally we're seeing dieback in all sizes, which is surprising. These are good questions, and thank you all for sharing your comments or your perspective in the chat, or asking questions.
That's all there is, Joey. So I want to thank you, and I'm very grateful that you came. Maybe there's another question now. Oh, here's another one. Lisa more
Yeah.
asked, is it thought that Doug fir dieback, WRC dieback, and big leaf maple dieback are attributable to a single cause? I have all three of these species in my yard, and I'm extremely interested.
So I really hope not. I mean, clearly Western Red, or say longer and hotter droughts that we've experienced, specifically in like 2015, is going to affect all trees and all plants and things like that. But each plant is adapted and can tolerate a little bit different change. And so I wouldn't suspect they're all going to respond at the same way, but I'm confident that climate change is going to affect all those species. With the big leaf maple thing, we've been seeing that for like they've been worried and concerned about it for 10 years now. So it seems to be something different. We just haven't quite been able to pinpoint what's going on with it. We really need more support for research for all these different issues. Like, within the state, there's a couple of us that are interested and out there looking. We, like what we said, we don't really understand, and even the basics of like where this is occurring and where it's not occurring. And so there's still a lot of information to be collected. With the Douglas fir and the red cedar, it might be similar. They've done a study in Portland across the like urban gradient, and they found that red cedar was much more susceptible to the change in like temperature than Douglas fir. So it seems like Douglas fir should be a little bit more tolerant and capable of adapting to or acclimating as climate changes. But I'd say keep your eye out. If feel free to reach out to me. I don't think you'll see all the same effects all at once, but but you might see over time, like all of these species struggle in their own way. If that makes sense.
So thank you for answering. Deb Naslin says, thank you so much for this great presentation. I just joined the iNat project, and I want to add that I'm also a member. I joined a little bit ago, but I'll be recording more now. You've given me more incentive to do it. So thank you.
No, thank you. And Gail, I appreciate you hosting and accommodating me and providing this opportunity to engage with you all. Thank you so much. And
it was a pleasure, and the information, it's so important, and it's a great way to engage the community and to be on the lookout, because you can't be everywhere, but we have more eyes. The more eyes out there, the sooner we can get to the bottom of the problem.
yeah, I agree. And we also want to we want to give back too. So if there's a way that we can support you or strengthen your confidence with recognizing tree health issues or anything like that, then that's why we're here. And yeah, this is, as I mentioned many times, your perspectives are really important, specifically because you're part of this Western or this Washington Native Plant Society. And so I encourage you, please follow up with me if any of these bits of information struck a note, and know that we're out there and we're here as a resource to you all, but also as people actively investigating what's going on with our native species, and we really want to be allies in that. So it's great to be able to connect with you all. Thanks again, Gail.
Thank you. Good night, folks. So Joey, can you stay on for a minute?